So the Lockyer Valley is ringed by mountains, so it's nestled in between this. We've got the Great Dividing Range there to the south, and these soils have come from basalt that's eroded on the top of those mountains. If you go up in Toowoomba, you'll see basalt as you go up there, and when you went up to West Holden, you may have seen some raw basalt coming out as you went up the range. Well, over time, that has eroded down here to produce these beautiful soils. The beauty about basalt is it's rich in phosphorus, and in the world, that's how we really determine the best soils is the phosphorus level. So these are very high in phosphorus, and they're very versatile soils, that they can be cultivated, and as I was saying to someone, maybe 2 to 3 crops a year, 2.5 crops a year, because once one crop's finished, they can cultivate and reset another. The other thing, there's an underlying aquifer. You understand that's a water-bearing geological formation. It's about consists of gravel and sand. If you drill down here, most of the boreholes probably down 25-30 metres. Unfortunately though, it's been overutilised, and now it's as I would have stressed in the lectures, that water. If you don't think about water when you're farming or in any aspect of our social life, you're not really thinking of the most important thing, because there's such a demand from different organisations, from urban use to electricity to mining and to agriculture. So this farm here switched very early to this trickle tape, which is an invention from Israel. And in the Lockyer Valley, what they've done now is, because the water table's so low, they have these submersible pumps, and they pump virtually 24 hours a day at low volumes into surface dams, and then they reticulate that water out of those surface dams. So as we're going around, I might be able to point out some of these little surface dams. They might hold 2 or 3 megalitres or 5 megalitres, something like that. I believe this is broccolini, and if you look down the rows, you can see as they harvest it, they strip off some of the leaves. So you're familiar with broccolini? We can go over and have a look at it. It's just the shoots that are taken off. You can see where they've broken them off, and they just sprout out of the side. They do form a central head initially, but then they produce all these little side shoots.
So what do they do with the central head, Ken?
I'm not sure if that's sold as a thing, but then that's a sprout. So you can imagine it's virtually we're a long way off to getting machine harvesting of that. They would come through maybe 4 or 5 times, yeah. This team is about to start. If we look down there, that's a harvest aid. So there's a conveyor out to the right there, and they walk on and just pick that and drop it onto there, and it comes into the central platform where it's put into those boxes. It may be even ice in those already, where they drop the product in there. As you can see, there's always quite a few escapes, so once it flowers like that, that's beyond commercial use. So we could even say, how can we get that more efficient? You probably can't get the labour to get over there enough times, but we're going to looks as though this team's about to start again, so we might just wander up there and you'll see them in action. So they're also stripping some of those older flowers out, some of them are.
So they run like it's a set speed for the whole field, or they slow up if it's kind of...
Oh, I think they can manipulate that speed, yeah.
And they're bunting at the
All right, so they've got them in their pocket, have they?
Got them in those little belts and those little money belts at the front.
Right. I'm not sure what size little bundles they're putting in. As Robin said, they're putting the elastic bands around straight into that little conveyor, and someone's packing them into... Those boxes go straight into Coles or Woolworths, those collapsible boxes. So they may be... you can see them stacked up there, but at this, because of I think the temperatures last night got down to about 3 or 4 degrees. So these, I can feel the coolness in here. You wouldn't probably need any ice on this stuff.
So they stop harvesting at a certain point in the day?
Due to temperature. Look, I can't answer really, Lockie, but they have got the facility to put it into, have ice and or take it straight up to the sheds where there's ice making machine and so forth. If we look back, you can get a bit better perspective of some of the infrastructure in this whole setup with the sheds, and we're only seeing one aspect. Beyond that is workshops and the truck parking. Yeah. So this land on the other side is probably being prepared for sweet corn. So we're in that transition period from winter into the summer production. So this is coming to the last of the winter production, and now we'll now grow beans and sweet corn over the summer period. This equipment here, this is a sprayer, and they would transport that stuff from here up to Bowen and Bowen to here, so there's quite a bit involved in that side of things as well. Harvesting broccoli here, this is the first pick. Dan said they'll pick it twice. The first pick they take about 70% of the crop and down to a 10 centimetre diameter head. And I'm not sure, maybe another week's time they will take the rest of the crop off. So you can walk in there and have a look at the heads. It looks beautiful to me. And he was saying that it's been a pretty kind season, that hasn't had to have a lot of irrigation. It's been quite cool overnight, and we've had that sporadic rain that comes through. And broccoli doesn't need a lot of water. So that would go straight, that tractor load there, those bins will go straight up to the cold room, put in ice, and then maybe even today be sorted into boxes and taken to the market. But just feel free to walk in there. You can see the different size heads on there. This is not quite ready, although they might get some, but yeah. And this is all transplanted. So obviously that one there, being on the end, you get a bit of end effect, so it's quite up to size. So there's a bit of work in there. You've got to bend down and just nick that off. And I think they like leaving a fair bit of stem on it, so when you buy it, you buy a bit of stem as well, because you buy it by the weight, don't you? Yeah. No. So this is very, very healthy looking crop, isn't it? They wouldn't miss too much in the broccoli. Yeah. I would say they'd keep an eye on that, and that's what he would be making that observation just in his head and planning. You can imagine the amount of planning that's going on when you've got crews. They may have 10 crews out here. They've got other farms up Laley Creek and down near the Brisbane River, so that he just does this. I went around with him one day and he just circuits around and keeps it all in his head and says, right, this is where we've got to be tomorrow and so forth. Yeah. You would have seen as we came around the corner there, they run a mulcher over it, and so that puts it into a mulch, and then that's incorporated into the soil. Now, these brassicas have an effect on, can have an effect on sterilisation effect on the soil, because they have isothiocyanates, I think, which is a soil sterilant. So they can, so that keeps down a lot of the diseases in the soils as well. Now, rotation, they might. This might go after this. Could later on have sweet corn or baby corn planted in here, or beans. So we've seen one tractor. I'm not sure if he just took that load up there. He may have just gone up there and put it there for the time being, and he's got another set of bins to fill. So this is the beauty of transplants, that you can see how even the crop is. If you direct seeded, you might have a bit more variation and more picks, 2 or 3 picks rather than, or 3 or 4 picks rather than 2. But to me, there seems to be a big bush there that you put a lot of energy into just to get one head out of.
I was thinking the same. Those leaves are massive, and we think that there's plenty of nutrient being funneled into that. Yeah. But so this will all go back in for organic matter, back into the soil, and you can see that, at this time of the year, the insect populations are not too bad, but diamondback moth is a major problem in the brassicas, and that's the spray machine we saw ripping down the road before over there working. So these later plantings will probably come under greater insect pressure. Well, we might just go, as we drove down, you would have seen a great bundle of black plastic tape. This is all only used once. And this is a tape down here. They'd run one tape between the 2 rows. You can see there's quite a bit of moisture still in there. That's the other thing about that coverage. That leaf coverage will retain the moisture under there. But I'm not sure what happens to that tape, whether they bale it up and it gets reprocessed. They're making lots of things out of plastic, recycled plastic.
Usually.
Yeah.
It's usually contaminated too much to be recycled.
Yeah.
Right.
And damage occurs when you actually pull this stuff out. So there is work being done on making a compostable version of trickle tape, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
And that's what we were talking about, the plastic mulch, to make a one that'll break down. And they were using that nanotechnology where they were just using little bits of plastic and holding them together with clay particles and making extrude a sheet out of that. But you can buy different qualities in this tape, and of course the more resilient it is, the more expensive it is. So they've tended to opt for single use. And they buy it by the semi-trailer load, so they're probably getting a discount on it.
Like a post-harvest question also, isn't it? It's about reducing the moisture loss. And like you say, if you do away with the plastics, then you've got losses all the time. Like you think of even the cut lettuce leaf and you buy it in a plastic bag. Imagine if that was just loose in a tray, and what wasn't taken within a few hours would have to get replaced with a fresh one. So
I can answer that one actually. So it's still a debate that carries on. There is a lot of argument for the fact that plastics involved in agriculture and food packaging can reduce food waste, especially in controlled environment packaging. However, as much as that does reduce the amount of water needed, as much as it does reduce the amount of food waste and the embodied energy and embodied water within that food, it still can potentially cause a lot of environmental harm down the track, depending what environment ends up with. So in an ideal situation, you've got programs like Red Cycle. You would have all seen that in your Woolworths, your Coles. They're taking some of that more softer plastics and getting recycled. That works out well. However, there is, and at that moment, not many localised recycling facilities within Australia. We still send a lot of our recycled material overseas, and that of course has the embedded carbon in transporting that recycled material, or material to be recycled. And where it ends up and whether it gets recycled appropriately is not actually managed all that greatly. So unfortunately it is a debatable topic. It depends on which side of the coin is your goal that looks good, but unfortunately we've still got a lot of work to do.
And you know, up until recently, China took a lot of this waste plastic, but that's stopped now, and I think some other countries may have stopped taking it as well. So we're left with having to find how to deal with it. This property here is one of the most recent acquisitions by Rugby farmers, right adjacent to the home farm, but it was owned by people just living here. They were elderly gentlemen, and they just had it grass, so it's been not growing crops for a number of years. It used to be a lucerne farm, and they would have made chaff in the old hay sheds and so forth. So lucerne was and still is a major crop in the Lockyer Valley, but this was a lucerne farm. The other thing is, you know, within this business, there's opportunities. We looked at last week some of the opportunities. There's people here working, agronomists or horticulturists working on the nutrition. You can see that doesn't seem to be lacking anything. There's entomologists. There would be also people working on just on the marketing side of it. Quality assurance and all that type of thing. So there's a whole suite of occupational opportunities in a business like this. Now this is one of several in the Lockyer Valley. We'll go past another one later on this morning, and then we had Qualipack, which is just down from the university, who deals in mainly onions, but they also do broccoli and then Mulgowie farming is another very big one, like Rugby, that does similar crops. So that's what happened. Just as we've driven through here this morning, there would have been 50 years ago 5 different farmers. So there used to be, this was one, there was one just across the road, one on the left where we pulled up, and a couple up further. So all those farms now have been amalgamated under this one umbrella. And that seems to be happening not only here but throughout Australia. What's the price of this land? Per hectare, it's probably up at $70,000, $80,000 a hectare. You know, fully with all the infrastructure of underground main and boreholes and, you know, water reticulation. Yeah, but that's not the only thing, of course, that's gone up in it. Just house prices and land, blocks of land. Yeah, and it's one of the few areas in Queensland, and this is very debatable. Apparently, it's going to be regulated, but here you can put down a bore and pump till your heart. In most of the areas, there's some areas that are regulated. If you're below an infrastructure such as Bilgun Dam or Atkinson's Dam, in that area there, it's regulated. And there's a lot of disquiet amongst the growers that some are regulated, others are not. What makes it valuable is if there's good supplies underneath. So there's a Tent Hill Creek just runs around there. This farm's pretty well situated because Tent Hill Creek runs there and Lockyer Creek's just over there, and the two meet just in that direction through there. So there's when it does, those creeks, that's the main recharge is when those creeks flow. So this benefits greatly, and plus there's a weir just upstream there on the Lockyer Creek, which helps build up this aquifer under this farm. But until a bit of a run earlier in this year, they were quite desperate here for water. I don't think there would be any licences out of the creeks here, really. In some further upstream, in flood time where there's no weirs, they can harvest some, but that part of it is regulated, yeah. But for most of this alluvial plain, no, you can put down bores and pump, but that will change. I think there's a process coming in where they'll allocate so many megalitres per hectare. And it's a bit like, you know, in suburbia where the more you use, the more you pay. And the more you use, that rate increases as you over utilise the water. And I just happen to notice there's different crop here. It's another brassica crop. Anyone know what this one is on my left? Any telltale signs there? It's cauliflower. Can you see a little head in there?
No. I don't. Not yet, I think.
So what happens, you can see there's 3 beds here. That's broccoli. So it matures before the cauliflower, so they harvest that, and then they can run the harvest aid down there to harvest the cauliflower at a later stage. And just as we're driving along, you can see that they've already harvested some beds, and that behind that tractor is a slasher, so they slash that down after they've harvested the broccoli, and I'm sure that's broccoli in those bins up there. And this stuff here looks as though it's ready to harvest. It's, you know, bigger than that 10 centimetres we were talking about. But again, you can see the beautiful layout that is enabled by this satellite guidance. And that's only come in the last 15 years, I suppose, into the Lockyer Valley. You know, years ago at the University of Queensland, there was they had a trialled what's the word I'm looking for? Not so much minimum tillage, but using tracks, permanent tracks to harvest. And they had a tractor that had a drive on either side, and it had a gantry on it, and you could move the cultivating tool all along that gantry, and it would just go down the row, and you'd only use wheel tracks, say maybe 5 metres apart, and you could cultivate all that in between with this one machine just by moving that cultivating tool along that gantry. But it never really took off. But the broadacre stuff did, and that was all done at the by Jeff Tolberg was Gatton College at the time, and that's become throughout the world that permanent tracks. They built the harvesters so that they're on the same wheelbase as the tractors, and so you reduce the compaction, you probably increase the soil health, or by using that system, but it never really took off in this horticultural field. Here we've got the little cauliflower head. If you want to come and have a look, those out. So that'll grow 2 or 3 times that size. And you can see it's quite a bit bigger plant than, well, maybe not than broccoli, but so the harvest aid will go down through here. Why that was that's happened there, I don't know. I really don't know why that one. But obviously it's going to be slashed out now. And over further, it's actually cut out. I might intercept that guy over there and just walking up there and see if he can give me an answer. The reason that this broccoli hasn't been harvested, it's just lack of pickers. Wasn't a high priority compared to the pure stands that we saw earlier. Another indirect effect of COVID that we can't just get, it's not only happening in this industry. I heard about the strawberry growers going to spray their crops out because they can't get pickers. And you would think eventually that should flow on to prices, but I don't know, in the supermarkets. But it seems a waste, doesn't it? This is just a rotary slasher. There's a bit like your lawnmower. There's two blades under there that swing around and just macerate that top growth into a mulch, as you can see on the right hand side here, and then so that allows free passage of the harvest machine to go down. I might just talk a little bit about potatoes while we're here, because this farm next to us, I thought we might see something there, but I can't see much activity in the field. But potatoes are very close to my heart because I worked about 15 years on them at Gatton Research Station when I was in the Department of Primary Industries. And as we said last week, it's the most eaten vegetable in the world. It's grown in every country, I think. I remember going to an international potato conference in Durban in South Africa, and I think every nation was represented. On the desks they had the little flags, and I don't think there were too many countries that weren't growing them. And I remember going down to the Falkland Islands, nearly as far south as you can go, and they were growing potatoes down there. And they were in the field. They were in the field too. They also had glass houses, but these were grown in the field. But there's, when I came back from central Queensland in 1985, potatoes and onions were still the major crops in the Lockyer Valley, and ever since then they've diminished. But there's still a few potatoes grown, and there's two main types grown here, the fresh market ones and the crisping ones. And we did a lot of work on the variety Atlantic, which became the standard crisping variety. Now, that's the ones you buy in the packets. And they've got a specific requirements in that they've got to have a high dry matter so they don't soak up a lot of oil and get that crispness. And they've got to be a sort of a tennis ball shape, because when they go in the factory they get sliced and deep fried, and then they go into those automatic filling machine, into those little plastic packets. So if you get a big flake coming across, it blocks the rest from going in, so a lot of the packets weren't getting filled. So they were getting a lot of angry purchasers of these things and saying, look, I'm paying for this packet of chips, but it's only got 2 in it or something. So they standardised on this tennis ball shaped potato, and that Atlantic filled that requirement as well. So it was a long-term standard. But you couldn't use it as a boiling potato or something like that. It'd just go to soup when you boil it. So there were the two distinct types. And this grower here, he's remained a crisping grower, I think, for Smith's Crisps. So in the valley, I'd say maybe 50-50 now, that there's so many grow fresh, so many grow for the processing market, but there's a standard, the processing one, you work it on a contract, whereas the fresh ones is probably just go through on a market price. Yeah, but certainly potatoes have diminished in the area grown, as has onions. It's all about light capture, isn't it? You don't want light going down here wasted. And you know, in Europe they talk about agrivoltaic farming. You ever heard that term? That in the early stages they put photoelectric cells down those gaps, generate the electricity and capture it in batteries so that they can become independent of external supplies of power. So they're harvesting that light wherever they can. As the crop fills in, as you can see here, there's virtually nearly 100% light capture, but there's a bit going down but you've got the nutrient, the soil, the water. All you need then is to maximise the utilise of light. Yeah, I think there can be things done at different times of the year. The other thing, as I said last week, you don't plant the same variety of collie or broccoli or cabbage. It changes with the day lengths and the temperature. And as our temperatures go up, we're racing against time trying to get varieties that will grow into those warmer temperatures. Again, this is all transplants. But you can see the evenness that you get from that. Dairy farm just further up, about another 2 mile up the road. So we used to ride bicycles and horses to this little school. As I was saying to the group in the bus, when this whole Lockyer Valley was opened up first and further east, there were sheep stations. And many of them retained the name of the station. There was Laidley Station, Grantham Station, they become little townships. But it was too wet, they found out, for sheep here. They got foot rot, and there was also spear grass got into the wool. So they moved the sheep out onto the downs, and this country got divided up into dairy farms. So virtually it was all dairy farms, and there were a number of butter factories. There was one at Grantham, one at Laidley, one at Beval and Ipswich. And so dairying was the backbone, not only of this here, but in many parts of Queensland as opened up. This particular farm is the original farm is Sutton Farms, and they own quite a bit of land over in Tent Hill, where we'll be going shortly. But they were quite innovative farmers, and Bernie was the mayor of Gatton Shire for a number of years, and he built these off-stream storages and got a licence to pump out of the creek. You can see the pipe going up into the dam there, and there'd be one just behind us going up into the dam. So that when that little creek over there, Marmar Creek, flooded, he was able to get water, because there's very little underground water here and the quality's not good. He perfected the art of growing tomatoes, and he's passed on, but his son and grandsons still very good tomato growers. And I remember I used to work here as a young person, about 14 or 15, and they had also had grapes here, muscatel grapes, which I still reckon is the best grape to eat. And so he tried lots of things, and he had a very good market for a number of years. And even at that time they were planting tomatoes, and just how basic it was. There was no irrigation, so he would have a tank on a slide full with water, and we would put a jam tin of water in each little hole that we dug and put transplant the tomato that way. And from that it's gone on to building these dams and using trickle. So he's been they've been very successful in tomato growing. If we look up there, you can see the top of that mountain coming down to the right. That last little peak with a couple of little trees standing on it, that's remnants of a volcanic plug. It was mined by the main roads to crush the metal to make these roads. And it was, if you go to Bilgun Dam or Lake Dyer outside of Forest Hill, all the wall is lined with the rock from that quarry that's there. It no longer operates, but that was right in front of our farm. But, you know, sadly, we believed in what the English told the farmers to do, was to clear all these mountains of the scrub. You can see a little bit of, not so much when we're down that other place. Maybe up in that little saddle up there you can see that dark green. That might be still a bit of original scrub. And that was part of the land tenure. If you got a land, you had to clear so much every year, otherwise you were kicked off the land. But as we found out now, that was probably the worst thing we could have done, because those trees stabilised that landscape. A lot of this now has gone from dairy farming into little blocks. People come out and buy blocks, or it's grazing. It's valuable land in the Lockyer, the Tent Hill Creek, and that's because it doesn't flood. Much of the land north of the highway, if you go to Brisbane from Gatton, there's a lot of land to the north. But in 2011, most of that land was covered by at least a metre of water. You wouldn't realise it. Even back, as we go back this way, where the water went is quite incredible. And another colleague and I were recalled as flood recovery officers, so we went around the farms immediately after that flooding, and the devastation, it was just incredible what went on and where the water did go. So that land that we're going to see shortly is probably the most valuable land in the Lockyer, solely because it doesn't flood even in extreme circumstances. Where we were this morning at Rugby Farm, where all those sheds were, there was a couple of metres of water went across there. They found the IGA sign in the packing shed from the Helidon IGA store. In the packing shed, there was a piano on the farm, and sadly about 3 or 4 bodies from Grantham. Some of the workers never went back after finding that on the farm. They were strewn with logs, and just unbelievable what happened.
And there were some bodies that were never found.
I remember walking the, and I don't know why the army didn't use little boats and go up the creeks rather than walk along the land, because there's places you couldn't, because the creek banks were so eroded, you couldn't walk along there. But I reckon you'd have seen a lot more by getting a little boat and going up the river. Yeah. Or the Lockyer Creek. We pulled up here because this is baby leaf. It's what's the species?
Oh, what is it?
Beetroot, isn't it?
No.
Oh, lettuce.
No, it's. Oh,
the baby leaf is
can someone tell me the baby leaf? What the species?
Cod. No.
Yes, but it's spinach. I think it's a spinach. Yeah, baby. And someone said, why are they using spray? Well, see how dense this plant? And again, this is one place you couldn't use transplants. That's been seeded in there. And so the overspray allows it to wet it up evenly to bring up the seedlings. And this stuff is cut here. It only grows maybe 10 centimetres high, and they have a reciprocating blade that cuts it and comes up on a conveyor, and they put it into boxes, wash it, and then send it to Melbourne, and it comes all the way back to the big to the distribution centres of Woolworths and Coles, and you can see that baby spinach in the racks in those stores. Now, we came here one day, and the farmer was going along there in the tractor, and he said the tractor's got a nappy on it, and underneath the tractor was this sheet. Wonder why that was there.
So they didn't get any debris and stuff on the leaf?
Yeah, any oil drips from them. So just how clean it had to be. So I just thought it was an interesting little, there's not too many of these around, but you know, on that slide one on the lecture last week was of this baby leaf. So they get different colours in it, and he found this to be quite a lucrative crop to grow. And this is the soil that I said is the most expensive in the Lockyer Valley because it's well above the creek level, and it's that beautiful alluvial soil formed on the Tent Hill Creek, and which we just crossed. And I pointed out to the people on the bus there was a little structure upstream, and years ago the Water Resources put these structures along the creek to retain the water in like basins, so to go down into the underground, but unfortunately they've never maintained, so they've just filled up with sand and silt. There's a couple, I think, behind the university in the same situation, and so now they're not effective. If we look up here on the right, it's a classic example of a transition as you go up of the geological structures. So those little knolls in the foreground are the same as where Gatton, the university is built on, Gatton sandstone. I don't know if you look, there's a quarry there just where we got on, some of us got on the bus, that's Gatton sandstone. And that's typical of the structure. When you get up higher, that division is coming into the Heifer Creek sandstones, and they are quite erodible. So you can see like the layer there that came down, and right on the top there would be a bit of basalt. So we're looking north, and an overview of how green is my valley, I suppose, and you know how reliant it is on water. You can see there a spray system. That's not a common thing here anymore, but I think they put some seedlings in there just to establish them, and then they may go on to trickle. But over in the distance there, you can see an orange tractor. That's a lot of lettuce in there being harvested. You can see a complex of buildings down there. That's another one of these super farms, as we want to call it, Windolphs. And when we were coming in this morning, I spoke to a group about the potatoes there just after we left the university. Well, that's the base farmers here. I'm not sure how much of this they own, but up until a few years ago, this was just grassland again because there was no water. After the 2011 floods, the aquifer was refilled, and it's gradually going down, down, down. And you can see one of these, or a couple of these little dams where they would be pumping day and night from a submersible pump, maybe, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 litres an hour into that dam, just going as they use the last in the aquifer. As you go, we're up the southern end of this particular valley, the Tent Hill Valley, and that's where the water goes first. At the headwaters, and as you go further down it keeps lowering down. It's unusual to see in front of us here a crop of pumpkins. I can see a little pumpkin on down here near this hose, because they are very frost susceptible, but we're obviously out of a frost zone, and these will attract a higher price. I grew up, as I said, on a little farm higher up, and we used to grow these pumpkins because we had a frost-free farm, and that's what really paid for our education. Was that we had a dairy farm that kept us alive, but the pumpkins were the ones that paid for the education. You can see the beautiful rich soils. Again, right on the tops of these hilltops there'd be basalt, and very intensively cultivated here. So I really brought you up here just to get an overview of the valley. And as Lockie said, you can see in the distance these that'll be national park that are burning, or forestry areas doing these pre-summer burns, which is a logical thing to do to reduce that fuel load. So that's the lungs probably of the Lockyer Valley and the coast. Those trees are pumping out oxygen and taking in carbon dioxide. So fortunately that was never cleared. So on the other side of that you'd be looking over to Caloundra and that region, you know, the north coast.
Ken, where they're harvesting down there, is that the Bowers Organics or is that the other side?
No,
The other side.
Bower Organics are further up the creek. Yeah. I went up there yesterday or on Saturday, but there's not much happening up there.
Yeah.
That's why I went to, and I was hoping to see something in those onions early on. We haven't really seen an onion crop, which is unusual. But the onions that we grow here are really early. They would be used to harvest them about now. And they're a soft onion. You know, when you go into the Coles and Woolies, those supermarkets, you get those hard onions, which are grown in southern Australia. We can't grow those here because they need a longer day. So they grow them over their summer. And the supermarkets like them because they don't break down. They'll store forever. But, you know, the Lockyer Valley had these sweet onions or soft onions that came in about now, and I still reckon they're the best barbecue onions you could get, but they're pretty hard to get. Because, remember last week we were talking about the consumer, how it's gone from the grower being in control to the consumer. I don't think it is the consumer, I think it's the supermarket, what they can make most out of. Because I'm sure the consumer would still like to get those Lockyer Valley onion, those early ones. So a lot of our onions now are planted much later, and they are a hard onion, but most of them are still hand harvested because they're a bit softer than the ones, whereas the ones down south, say in Tasmania, they lift them and just leave them lie on the ground and then pick them up with mechanically. But the other thing is that we had a pretty serious disease called white rot in onions, and it was rife if you had wet conditions in June, July, so they've tended to stagger the plantings later so they don't they're not in forming bulbs in that period to escape that zone and that possibility of white rot. Because once you've got that white rot organism, it's a fungus, it stayed as a sclerote, like a seeding body in the soil for, you know, maybe 20 years. And people say, oh, well, we can go back, and there it was again. And because we have flooding in the Lockyer Valley, most of that land, as I said, north of the highway, you couldn't grow onions there anymore because the flood carried these spores, these sclerotes around.